the nicest things about playing New World, reason I always come back to this game, is that it's not a perfect game, but it doesn't need to be, because there's no subscription model. Now, if you were really into it and you wanted to, you could pay for a battle pass. That's true. But there's no need to pay a monthly fee. There's no real gimmicks or manipulation that make you feel like you have to subscribe to something in order to log into the game. And I think that's important, because there's so many amazing games out there. There's so many amazing experiences out there. There's been too many times when I've felt like I needed to prioritize one particular game experience over other ones, or maybe even over other real life activities. It's nice to just take time, and if you want to play the game, you do. And if you start to feel burned out on it, or you feel bored of it, then you just don't play for a while. And with New World, it's exactly that way. There's some times when I just don't really feel like playing the game, so I just don't play the game for a period of time. But what's nice is when I do feel like coming back to it, it's just there. There's no need to go through the mental gymnastics of saying, okay, should I reinstall the game and resub to it? And do I need to get my account active again or something like that? You just hit play and you're back in the world again. And anything you get out of the shop is ultimately completely optional. Battle Pass is completely optional. It's a buy to play game that really is truly buy to play and play forever, just like any other PC game. I think it's gotten to be too toxic the way there's these MMOs that want you to pay by the month. It doesn't seem like a really crazy idea when you're involved in it, but once you step back a little bit and you think about it in a purely honest way, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, because you can play a lot of multiplayer games that require active servers without paying a subscription fee. Think of a game like Age of Empires, for example. You don't have to pay a subscription fee to play Age of Empires 2. You just buy the game and play it. It has an online service element, but it's totally free to play once you buy the game. And when you think about a game like New World, which has amazing graphics, and you pay maybe $70 for the entire experience, and then you compare that to some other MMOs where you're going to probably pay somewhere in the neighborhood of that amount just to get started, and then you're going to pay $15 a month, possibly multiplied by multiple different games if you have more than one subscription. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no way you can say over the course of a year or two that you've gotten $150 or $200 worth of value out of that title versus another game where you probably would just pay $60 or something, and that would be the total amount you paid. I think that we tend to ignore these things just because maybe it's inconvenient truth to acknowledge that there's a certain degree of time and money that we've sunk into something that isn't really worth our time and money. And I think that that's also not entirely fair, because you know, you can put money and time into something and you can enjoy it. And that doesn't mean that you have to do it forever, you know? Sometimes we feel like because we've done something and it hasn't worked out very well, we have to have a sense of regret if we move on. We have to go through these gymnastics of feeling like we've somehow let ourselves down because we moved on from something. And that's not fair. I'm not saying that you should ever look at an experience and say, well, you know, I did not get my money's worth out of that experience, because I think if you had a good time, you did get your money's worth. It's just, you can sub to something for a year or something, and that doesn't mean that you need to do it for the rest of your life. But I think for me, as time goes on, more and more, I feel like I don't want to feel chained to something. And there's so many experiences in life where sometimes you want to enjoy something new, but you're tied to something old. And it's hard to let go of those old things so that you can experience the new things. And then we get frustrated with those old things because they haven't quite lived up to our expectations. But it's really not them that we should be frustrated with. We really shouldn't be frustrated at all. We just should find things that aren't going to disrespect our time. And a game that wants you to pay by the month to access it really doesn't respect your time. I know people will say otherwise if they're fans of that game, but the reality is, if you have to ask yourself the question of whether something respects your time or not, it really doesn't. And if you're kind of using a game as a placeholder, kind of like it's a relationship or something, and then you're always expecting that you're going to give time and money to that thing, but you don't really get the value out of that thing. It's just, you know, it's keeping you from having other experiences. In the case of a game like New World, I don't really care if New World doesn't live up to my expectations, because if it doesn't, then I can always just play something else. I've gotten a really great value for my money out of New World. But I couldn't necessarily say that about other games where the truth is the content isn't worth paying a sub for. But once you're into it, then you have that sunk cost fallacy working against you, and you start to feel like you have to keep on coming back to it, and you have to keep on having that internal argument about whether, you know, it's giving you the best value for your time and money, and you have to kind of go to bat for it and try to make a defense for why the game is worth your time, even though the truth is you're not really having all that much fun with it. So, what's the moral of this? I guess it's all just that you should have fun and put effort into things that don't try to be possessive of your time. Because if you leave room in your life for whatever good things come along, then you can relax and you can not worry. And then if something doesn't really live up to your expectations, then you just look for another thing you can use to sort of fill that void. You don't expect any one thing to be perfect, because life is filled with a lot of different tools in the war chest. And, you know, that's like a relationship where maybe you expect one person to be everything to you, but then they can't be everything, so they start to let you down. But if you have room in your life for a lot of different relationships throughout your life, then you're never really going to be let down, because you're never going to look at one person and say, well, you're not good enough. People are just there for a time and a season, and then sometimes we have other people there to fulfill other needs that we have. Like, you could have a good friend, a buddy, and that's not going to be a person who's filling the same role as, for example, your spouse. But by the same measure, if you gave up all of your personal friends for the sake of a romantic relationship, well, maybe that romantic partner is not going to be able to fulfill the same role that your old hanging out buddies would have, right? So then what happens when you did replace all your friends with that one romantic relationship? Well, then maybe she's not good enough, right? Because she can't be everything. You still need to have those people that you just hang out with and just have a good time and chill with, you know? But if a relationship is controlling, then you might be in a situation where you kind of lose those personal things for the sake of somebody who expects you to let them be a replacement for every part of your life. That's not healthy. Not healthy in a game either, though. And I think MMOs are really guilty of that. They almost want to kind of be like a relationship, you know? You pick what MMO is yours, and then you have this kind of a religious dedication to that game. And that's entirely facilitated by the subscription model. It really is. Because if you don't have to pay a subscription for the game, then you just play it to whatever degree you want to play it, and if you feel like you don't, then you don't. But if there's a subscription, then now you have to kind of figure out which one do you want to commit to. Are you fully bought in? Are you selling? Are you know, what are you doing there? And that's not a fun place to be in. And it's just not a good thing, really. And I think it's nice to not have to worry about that one extra bill, you know? It's not that I can't afford it. I can afford to pay a $15 a month sub fee. It's not about that. It's just so much nicer mentally to not have that burden of thinking, oh my goodness, yeah, but I paid some money into this, so I guess I have to play now. It's just not fun. And when you realize that there's lots of other games you can play that don't have that mechanic in them, why pick those few games that do, when there's so many good ones out there that maybe they're not perfect, but there's so many different games out there. You don't have to pay. You don't have to pick the one that costs you $15 a month to play that you don't even enjoy that much. So there's that. And you take it or leave it. It is what it is. You know, I've paid subs for a lot of different games, and I've enjoyed them. It's just, I think that after a certain period of time, you kind of feel like you've seen the world, you've seen the basic gist of what the game's about, and it's just not really, you know, it's not something that you need to spend the rest of your life doing. And maybe you get yourself a few trinkets and some souvenirs, and stick them on the shelf and say, you know, that was a cool game I played, but you know what? I think a year of being subscribed to that game is enough. I gotta do some other things. Gotta keep it interesting. So don't be chained to one thing. Don't be tied up in one particular thing you want to be everything, because then you'll be mad and you'll be frustrated when it lets you down. But if you leave yourself open to having all sorts of positive experiences wherever you might find them, however they may manifest themselves, then you're never going to really be frustrated when one thing ends, because it just means it gives you free time and space for something new to begin. Good luck in your adventures, wherever they may take you. Till next time. Thank you.